learners, welcome back to the course on agricultural economics. In this session, we'll be discussing about need of land reforms in Indian agriculture and critical evaluation of land reforms. The need for land reforms in an agrarian country like India is immense. In many cases, backwardness of Indian agriculture can also be attributed to defective land policy adopted in the country. Some of the problematic areas in land policy of India as identified by the Planning Commission of India are like presence of multiplicity of intermediaries between government and cultivators, which we have already discussed in the previous session, then land of adequate security of tenure, then fixation of high rent and lack of incentive, large-scale subdivision and fragmentation of holdings, and the impediments arising on it towards adoption of modern and scientific methods of cultivation, unequal distribution of land among farmers, low productivity per hectare of land, and increasing inequality between rich and poor as a result of Green Revolution. Now let's have a look into some of the important land reforms in India. First, the creation of economic holdings through redistribution of land to small and marginal farmers with a view to facilitate adoption of modern, improved farming techniques. Then the removal of intermediaries and tenancy systems, thereby giving the ownership of land to actual cultivator, which in turn provide incentive to the farmer. There is also increase in production and productivity through by increasing in size of land holding as well as development of cooperative farming. And the establishment of the direct link between government and the farmers through abolishing the intermediaries. It is possible to establish a direct link between government and farmers, and which in turn facilitate the government to implement plan for agricultural development. It also helps in securing social justice among millions of farmers in India by transferring them ownership rights to lands, fixing ceiling on land holding, and by reducing the exploitation of the farmers. Now look into there is an economic argument in the favor of land reform. So what is this? We can discuss this argument in three broad categories. The first one is equity. So what is this? The most celebrated argument in favor of land reforms in India is equity. In a country that is India, which is basically known as a land scarce country, with a significant sections of below poverty level rural population, it ensures the fair distribution of land, and it becomes imperative that everyone has access to minimum portion of land. So India is a country which is actually scarce in lands. Secondly, higher productivity of small farmers. Land reforms helps in the higher production of the small farms. How? That is, quite a large number of research from various parts of the country by researchers have widely documented that small farms tends to be more productive than large farm, and land reform promotes the small farms. Then the third one is ownership cultivation versus sharecropping. Land reform encourages cultivation by the owner, where farmers directly manages the land they own. Further, there were evidences that owner cultivated plot of land tend to be more productive than those under sharecropping. Then the fourth one is abolition of intermediaries. It is one of the most important achievement of land reform, that is abolition of intermediaries. The presence of large number of intermediaries in agricultural sectors have been identified as an obstacle to growth and development of Indian agriculture, and the land reforms were argued for abolition of intermediaries. In fact, The intermediaries were abolished within a few years after independence, and the actual tillers accounting for about 40% of the cultivated area, which were became the owners. Now let us have a discussion about the tenancy reforms. As we have already discussed that tenancy reform is a major part of land reforms measures. Under tenancy reforms, the important component was conferment of ownership right to the tenants. As per the tenancy regulations policy introduced at the national level, large landowners were allowed to evict the tenants and to bring the land under personal cultivation up to a ceiling limit, which is to be prescribed by each state. What is a personal cultivation? The term personal cultivation was used to define the cultivation by the owner of the land and others members of the farmer's family. The tenants of those land which were not resumable, that is, which were without landowner, were given occupancy rights on payment of a price to be fixed as a multiple of the rental value of the land. The owners of the land not exceeding a family holding, which were defined as a small owners. The land belonging to small and middle owners, which actually was divided into two categories, as for land under personal cultivation and land leased to tenant at will. If the land possessed was below a ceiling restriction. Now, what is actually ceiling restriction? A ceiling restriction can refer to a limit on the amount of land a person or a family can own, or a maximum limit on a financial factor. So, if the land possessed was below a ceiling restrictions, tenants of such land owner were given limited protection, provided that it should be renewed for 5 to 10 years and should be renewable, and that the maximum rent payable should not exceed 20 to 25% of the gross produce of the land. But in contrast, in the second 5-year plan, the definition of personal cultivation was amended with 3 other elements like risk of cultivation, personal supervision, as well as personal labor. This further narrowed down the definition of who was actually eligible for the ownership rights on the land. In the third 5-year plan, the final goal was fixed on conferring rights of ownership to as many tenants as possible. The policy suggested that the state should study the problem and determine the suitable action in light of prevailing condition. And what happened in the fourth 5-year plan? The tenancies were suggested to be declared non-resumable and permanent, except in the case of landowner working in defense service or with any disability. So, dear learner, the land where cultivators, agricultural laborers, as well as artisans had constructed their houses was now to be their own land. So, all these efforts were partially successful in reversing the condition of British era. However, there were issues of tenants being forced to sell the lands due to poverty. The government was suggested to make effort to bring them within the institutional credit regime. What happened in the sixth 5-year plan? A time-bound schedule was given to the state to implement the measures of land reforms. It further recommended that the state in which legislative provisions for conferment of ownership rights on the all tenants did not exist should immediately introduce appropriate legislative measure within 1 year. That was the time of 1981 to 1982. However, it was not achieved in all states. Now, coming to the large versus small farm. Quite a large number of criteria has been used to define a small farm. Different economists as well as agriculturists define small farms by using different criteria. Say for example, classified farms according to the number of workers or value of the gross output produced. The common criteria used for his classification of farm into large and small farm are number of workers or laborers, value of the gross output, and area of cultivation. In capitalist agriculture, the quantity of scarce factors in agriculture is taken as measure for farm classification. For instance, in USA, where labor is scarce, number of laborer or worker engaged in cultivation is considered as a criterion for division of farms into small as well as large farm. And what happened in India? In India, land has become a scarce factors in the agriculture. So what happened in India? In India, land is scarce. Therefore, area of land holding is used as a criteria for classification of farm into large and small farm. So in India, the area of land holding is used as a criterion for the classification of large and small farm. According to Small Farmers Development Agency, that is SFDA, farms with 1 to 2 hectares land is considered as small farms, while farms with less than 1 hectares of area of land holding is considered as marginal farms. Now coming to the economics of large farm. Let us discuss the benefit of large farm on the following ground. That is, first one is technical economy. So what is this? A large farm may have the advantage of application of specialized machineries like scientific equipment, technical know-how, etc. As the average cost of production of farm decreases with the increase in size of the farm. In case of large farm, more area is available for productive use. The overhead cost of production per unit output decline on large farm. Rotation of crop is easy for large farm as large area is available for cultivation of various crops. Operational cost of machinery in per acre of land is low because of full utilization of machinery in large area of cultivation in case of large farms. Huge resources and capacity to tackle the risk of failure enable a large farm to introduce new crops. For an optimum use of scarce management and skilled manpower, a large farm is necessary. The quality of the output can be controlled if the size of the farm is large and its number is few in the market. This situation is also impetus for proper adjustment of the individual farm output to the market outlet. Now coming to this is all about the technical economy of a large farm. Now coming to the financial economy. The size of a large farm enables the farmer in obtaining easy credits from multiple sources. The availability of borrowing a huge sum of money at lower interest rate from outside sources makes large farmer, the availability of borrowing a huge sum of money at lower interest rate from outside sources makes a large farmer gain the opportunity to invest agriculture as per the requirement. When the large farmer needs immediate money, he can withhold the sale of his output in the market, and thus this will also permit him to sell his output at the most favorable prices in the market. Now coming to the commercial economy. So the commercial economy refers to the benefits that a large farm can obtain in business, that is by buying and selling the activities. A large farm can obtain economy in buying large quantity of output at lower prices. It can also get the economy of supplying its large amount of outputs to the various market, that is for local market, district, national as well as international, with lower cost of transportation. Now coming to the economics of small farms. Let us discuss the economics of small farms over large farm in the following category. That is, what are the advantages? There is an advantage in monitoring and supervision in case of small farm. The supervision of each and every worker in agriculture is difficult if the size of the farm is large. It is self-understood that if the size of the farm is large, the supervision is somewhat difficult. In case of small farm, as the workers are working in close vicinity, the supervision of worker is easy. Then second is the need for spot decision. The decision in agriculture are to be made mostly at spot, as most of the product of the agriculture are perishable and the agriculture production is affected by many physical factors, climatic factors, etc. These frequent and immediate decisions are very much important to taken by the farmer himself. If the size of the farm is small, it is very easy for the farmers to take decision. Otherwise, it is difficult to take decisions if the farm size is large. Then the next in agriculture is generally a family propositions. So what is this? As agriculture is taken as a family propositions, therefore policy regarding amount of input to be used, output to be produced, or quantity and quality of workers to be employed is decided by the family members. If his policy is to change from generation to generation, then large-scale farming organization will be discouraged. Then the next is tenacity of small farm. Some small-scale farming is a feature of small farm, and generally family members work in their own farm. The higher flexibility in the supply of laborers by the family members determine the tenacity of a small farm. By coping up with the various fluctuation in needs of the quantity of labor supply due to the condition, according to the condition of weather, as well as unpredictable needs of crops and livestock. Then the productivity of small farm. Some studies reveal that the output per acre was higher on small farms than on large farms. This is mainly due to the fact that in small farm, what happens? The scope for intensive cultivation is much larger than the large farms. Then generation of employment opportunity. Small farm use labor intensive techniques and large farm use capital intensive techniques. Therefore, small farms create more employment opportunity than the large farm. Again, greater intensity of cultivation in small farm generate more employment. Next, the quality of output. Agriculture is as we all know that agriculture is a very tough occupation, and it requires consistent hard work, care and attention. In small farm, the farmers render majority of the activities manually and nourishes the crops. They can take proper care of the by their own, like a baby, as they do not have capital access to modern and costly machineries. Again, if the motivation of small farmer is to feed their own family, they never compromise on the quality of the product because it is the matter of their own family. However, in case of large farm, what happens? The farmers are concerned with the cost benefit calculation, and then they seem to be ready to compromise on the quality of the product. Now coming to the critical evaluation of land reforms. So let us look at the progress of land reforms measures adopted by the Government of India in its various 5-year plans. We can discuss the progress of land reforms measures Indian agriculture under 3 different phases. That is from 1936 to 1955, then 1956 to 1971 and 1972 to 1995. The first phase is 1936 to 1955. During this period, the state government and the union territories had given top priorities in bringing actual cultivators in direct contact with the state government through abolition of zamindars and other intermediaries. We have already discussed it. To the achievement, that is, as a result of this move, it has been noticed that towards the end of second 5-year plan, intermediaries covering about 40% of the area were largely abolished, and as many as 20 million tenants were brought into direct contact with the state. Nearly 57.7 lakhs hectares were distributed to the landless agricultural laborer under Zamindari Abolition Act in various states. And what happened during this phase? Emphasis were laid on bringing tenancy reforms, which basically aimed at conferring the rights of ownership of tenants. Several measures like declaring tenants as owners and making them pay compensations to owners in suitable installment, acquisition of right of ownership by the state for payment of compensation, and transfer of ownership of tenants and state acquisition of the landlord right, bringing tenants into direct relationship with the state. About 30 million tenants had the right on tenure held land in the process, and most of them free of cost. A significant number of tenants in Assam, Kerala, Maharashtra, West Bengal, Gujarat and Karnataka had benefited from the tenancy reforms, while in other states it was marginal. In the state when ownership rights could not conferred on tenants, they were protected through security of tenure by not allowing eviction of tenants and reducing the rent from 20 to 25% of the yield. And out of the estimated 50 million protected tenants, West Bengal alone had given recorded rights of hereditary occupancy to 1.46 million tenants. So, though tenancy reforms were undertaken, the reforms measures still had certain limitations. So what are those limitations? That is, the first one is sharecropper, who constitute bulk of the tenant cultivators, have been excluded from reform measures. Then second one is, on several grounds eviction of tenants had taken place. Then third one is, as a result, as a fall out of tenancy reforms, especially resumptions given in the legislation, land grabbing by the unscrupulous was quite present. Then the fourth one is, there is non-recording of tenancy in land records. Hence, ownership rights could not be conferred on a large body of tenants. So these are certain limitation of tenancy reforms. Then coming to the second phase, that is from the 1956 to 1971. During this phase, as a part of reforms, ceiling on agricultural land holding has been imposed to redistribute surplus land among the rural poor. In response to this, all states enacted ceiling laws by the end of 1961. Through ceiling limits were different. However, ceiling limits were different for different states. Near about 1 million hectares of agricultural land were identified, out of which around 50% were distributed among the rural poor. Then coming to the third phase, that is from 1972 to 1995. During the phase, the major breakthrough was to reduce existing land holding ceiling limit, especially in the conference of Chief Minister held in New Delhi on the 23rd July 1972. The revised ceiling limits were, first one is the government irrigated land should enjoy a lower ceiling limit ranging from 4 hectare to 7 hectare. Then next one is the privately irrigated land. The ceiling limit ranges from 5 hectare to 7 hectare. And the third one is the dry land and other kinds of agricultural land. The ceiling limits should not exceed 22 hectare. So this was fixed during this phase. The ceiling laws were implemented during the 6th 5-year plan period, that is from 1980 to 1985. But during the 7th and 8th plan period, there was no any progress, and it had come to a standstill in a majority of states. Towards the end of 1996, the area of declared surplus was 30.59 lakh hectare, of which 26.47 lakh hectare were taken possession of, and 21.2 lakh hectare were distributed among 51.21 lakh beneficiaries in the country. About 8.78 lakh hectares of land was not available for distributions for reasons. What are the reasons? Like involvement of hearing in various courts, reserve for transferred surplus land for public purpose, unsuitable land for cultivation, etc. The estimates from Planning Commission state that the area distributed under the ceiling laws accounted for only 1.5% of the net cultivated area and beneficiary. And at the same time, most of the ceiling surplus land were very poor in quality and required heavy investment for bringing them under the plow. So it was very difficult to bring them under cultivations. Equally important is to note that most cases the beneficiaries receive less than 0.5 hectare of land, and hence such holding could not provide economic substance or economic viability to the beneficiary of farm household. So dear learners, as regards the ceiling on the land holdings and distribution of surplus land among landless, there were 2 rounds of land reform legislation was there. That is one in 1950 and another in 1970s. However, due to various exemptions provided in the law and due to lack of political will, the objective of this reform could not be fulfilled, and not much surplus land could be acquired by the government for redistribution among the landless. So dear learner, hope you have got a clear picture of land reforms Indian scenario, and with this I conclude this session. Thank you.